This is Scotland's Caledonian forest. Dominated by Scots pine, this unique and ancient forest arrived here after the glaciers that carved out the hills and glens of Scotland retreated some 10,000 years ago. This makes this forest older than the Sahara Desert, older than the notion of countries. In fact, this forest is so old, it's older than all of recorded history itself. Despite persevering for thousands of years and once covering much of the Scottish Highlands, the Caledonian forest has suffered. It's suffered from deforestation, a changing climate and invasive species, and now there's only 1% left. This 1% is split into 84 individual fragments scattered across Scotland's Highlands. And you and I, well, we're on a mission to visit all of these Pinewood remnants before they're gone forever. Along the way, we'll learn about the history of Scotland's Pinewoods, the issues they face and the work being done to protect them. Today, we're in the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park, where we're visiting the two most southerly pinewoods in all of Scotland, but also two of the most threatened. This series is an exploration of Scotland's ancient old-growth forests and a love letter to them. It's a celebration of their existence and a demand for their protection. This is Scotland's Caledonian Pinewoods. This is Glen Falloch, the most southerly remnant of Caledonian pinewoods in all of Scotland, and one of two pinewoods found here in the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park. Now, Glen Falloch might appear insignificant. There's barely over 100 mature trees here. There's a Sitka spruce plantation surrounding this exclosure, and it looks entirely isolated. Yet Glen Falloch is way more important than it seems. Check this out. This is Dun Falloch. It's a knoll that was created from glacial deposit. On top of it, you'll see some mature Scots pines. Now, they're only there because the gravel that makes up this glacial knoll drains better than the blanket bog that now surrounds these knolls, which means it's much easier for the trees to grow there. This is a tremendous example of how the rocks beneath our feet and the erosional forces that shape those rocks into landforms interact with the ecology of the Caledonian Pinewoods. Pines grown here isn't the only gift that this soil has given us, however. Pollen analysis taken from the soil here has revealed to scientists that this pinewood is unique in its formation. It is believed the Glen Falloch pinewood established around 4,300 years ago, which is odd because this is considered a time where pinewoods in Scotland were retreating. In fact, so pronounced was this era of retreating pinewoods, it was named the Pine Decline. These changes in Caledonian forest coverage are usually attributed to a shift in our climate, as this was when Scotland began to shift to a warmer and wetter climate. Yet in those very conditions, this pinewood was on the march. This suggests that the tolerance for warmer and wetter conditions in the Caledonian pinewoods might be a bit higher than we thought, but it's hard to tell, because as this pinewood was forming and others were retreating, there was something else happening in Scotland beside the climate changing. Something else that also had a profound impact on our pinewoods. It was the rise of Bronze Age agriculture. As Scotland's climate turned warmer and wetter, Bronze Age communities got to work felling the forest. They harvested the timber for homes, cleared areas for livestock, and created permanent settlements. As this was happening at the same time as waterlogged soil and blanket peat was forming, there's a lot of debate around what drove the retreat of the pinewoods more. Looking across the North Sea to southwest Norway, however, it is possible to begin understanding what primarily drove the loss of the pinewoods back here in Scotland. Norway, just like here, lost many of their forests at the same time the climate shifted and human agriculture began expanding. This deforested landscape, like Scotland, is something that persisted for thousands of years. Unlike Scotland, however, it lasted right up until the 20th century. This is because Norway also suffered from something that greatly impacted the Scottish Highlands: depopulation. But unlike Scotland, the people were not replaced with huge flocks of sheep on the same scale. They were not replaced with deer forests for the elite to hunt. Land was left without intense grazing pressure and few people to manage it. And as a result, the forest returned. The forest re-establishing itself in Norway, despite having a wetter climate than here, coupled with the establishment of the Glenfalloch Pinewood during a period where Scotland's climate became warmer and wetter, shows us that it was likely human activity that kept the forest at bay here, and a return to widespread reforestation in Scotland is possible.
Now here at Glenfalloch, this is definitely a pinewood that shows evidence of both issues.
Surrounding these knolls where the mature pines grow is blanket bog, which makes the recruitment of pines in these areas extremely difficult. Yet still standing are the reminders of how far this pinewood once stretched, and a not so distant memory too.
Now if you look behind me, you'll see these knolls here, right? The glacial knolls that we were talking about where the pines like to grow. And if you look closely, you'll see bones of the forest. They're these dead trees that show you how far the forest used to come, and they are of course on top of these glacial knolls. These are dead Scots pine trees that are markers of a forest of years gone by.
Just over 200 years ago, in 1808, over 5,000 trees in the Glenfalloch Pinewood were put up for sale, and felling continued. This left us with the small fragment that we see here today. The future of this pinewood was under threat for many years as the older trees were dying off and overgrazing was preventing the natural regeneration and the younger generations coming through. However, in the 1980s, a tiny 1 hectare exclosure was erected to establish if natural regeneration was possible. The success of this trial led to the establishment of 2 more exclosures in 1994, with over 1,000 pine saplings planted from Glenfalloch trees, giving new life to this battered but important pinewood. To what extent the Glenfalloch Pinewood can truly expand, however, is up for debate, with exclosures struggling to keep out some of the overpopulation of deer, commercial forestry plantations just a stone's throw away blowing in invasive Sitka spruce seeds, and situated on a traditional Highland sporting estate. It seems like the management have to be aggressive to ensure the expansion of this pinewood beyond its cage. Owned by the Glenfalloch estate, there are concrete efforts to protect this pinewood. They even have their own nursery growing trees from seeds on the estate. Despite Glenfalloch's small size and sometimes bleak appearance, this pinewood is an interesting mixture of many factors that make the pinewoods compelling. The glacial landforms, the changing climate, the human impact, overgrazing, Sitka spruce plantations, large highland estates, they all come together here to create a truly unique Caledonian pinewood.
Before we head over to the next remnant of Caledonian pinewoods, I want to talk to you about an organisation that is doing fantastic work to protect and expand Scotland's Caledonian forest, and that is Trees for Life Scotland.
Since their foundation in 1986, Trees for Life Scotland have been working to restore the Caledonian Pinewoods in Scotland's Highlands and currently have one of the largest areas in the UK dedicated for forest restoration. This video and subsequent Pinewood adventures just wouldn't be possible without the research the team at Trees for Life Scotland have carried out. So over this series, we're going to be raising money to donate to them at the end, as a thank you for all of the hard work they do, and that will of course help the protection and expansion of the Caledonian forest going forward. If you're interested in donating, then the link is in my description.
Let's get back to the Pinewoods.
Heading north on an old military road built to suppress the rowdy Highlands, you soon arrive at the larger pinewood found here in this national park. This is Colley Kerry Coolach. Nestled at the foot of Ben Oss and Vendouch Craig Monroes, this pinewood, just like Glenfalloch, has been separated from the other pinewood remnants for so long that they're genetically distinct. Rounded crowns make up the forest canopy, and on the forest floor you can see these huge Scottish wood ant nests with cities inside. This remnant is home to some of the rarest invertebrate species in Scotland, with many of them being restricted to just pine woods alone. With glacial deposit forming undulating ground here, it's no surprise to see the mature pines growing on top of the better draining knolls. Now, information on when this pinewood established exactly isn't readily available, but we can piece together how humans have impacted this pinewood. Just as felling took place in other parts of this region in the 18th century, it is likely the same happened here. With a lead mine opening up just up the road in Tyndrum towards the end of the 1700s, it is entirely possible the pinewoods around here were felled for timber support and fuel. In the 18th and 19th centuries, iron smelting was common and required a lot of timber. Since then, the pinewood here has suffered from heavy overgrazing for over 200 years, and as you can see, the situation remains similar. There is some regeneration found within the exclosures created in the latter end of the 20th century, but there's also signs that these fences haven't held up. Another major threat to this pinewood is the commercial conifer plantations that surround it. With this pinewood being hemmed in on all sides by commercial forestry, this prohibits the natural regeneration and expansion of the Caledonian pinewood here. There's just no room for it to grow. With Glenfalloch just over the hill there, surely the long-term goal of the national park has to be connecting these two pinewoods up, allowing for gene flow between the two populations that exist, thereby creating healthier pinewoods and of course creating a wildlife corridor whilst we're at it. Unfortunately, that's not how it works here in Scotland under our current land ownership system. Despite this area being in one of our national parks, the national park doesn't actually own the land. The land is owned by private landowners, and this is where the management of this pinewood gets really interesting. Unlike most other pinewoods where the overgrazing is mainly done by deer, here it is mainly done by sheep, and the national park are aware of this issue, but they're powerless to stop it. They can't tell someone to stop letting sheep out on their own land. And what's really crazy though is that the sheep that graze on this land are supported through the Scottish taxpayer in a scheme called the Upland Hill Sheep Support Scheme. And on the other hand, the Scottish taxpayer is also paying for the conservation of these pinewoods through government agencies and organisations like Nature Scot and the National Park. So the public in this instance is paying for both the protection and destruction of this Caledonian pinewood remnant. The Caledonian pinewood remnants in the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park are unique, with Glenfalloch forming when other pinewoods were retreating, and Collykerryculloch highlighting Scotland's land ownership issue in regards to nature conservation. These two pinewoods paint a picture of perseverance. The fact that they are still standing today is an achievement by itself, but I can't help but feel like we're letting them down. In a time of climate crisis, and with the carbon capturing abilities of old growth forests evident, the time for radical ambition and reforesting these areas was way over 20 years ago. I don't know about you, but I would love to see these pinewoods allowed to expand beyond the cages that they're currently in. Nature is not supposed to fit in a box, it's not supposed to fit in a cage, and let's just let them expand naturally. I dream of a Scotland where restoring these remnants is front and centre of our future. Thank you all for watching, and see you in the next video.